Hello there, and welcome to episode 63 of Cuzzo-OP. I'm one of your hosts here, Willie, aka Arrow, and as usual, we have the co-host here at Cuzzo-OP, my cousin.
Hi V, what's good? Welcome back for another episode. Let's go, man.
So, we are here today with a very special episode about something very meaningful to our family. And so, months ago when we were conceptualizing this episode and thinking that we wanted to do something special for what today means, we thought, why not have a special guest from our family that just makes sense to have here? So we have our grandmother, Evelyn, here with us to speak about our topic today. So, Grandma, say hello.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Thank you for having me on your show. On your podcast. Let's see. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. So, we are here today on a special anniversary. So, as you may have been able to read, this episode is called My Name is Pedro. My Name is Pedro is a documentary that released in 2017 about a man that we all have known, named Pedro Santana, who on this day in 2014 passed away because of cancer. And so we thought that it would be awesome 10 years after his passing to sit here and speak about this documentary about him and just talk about the legacy that he has on all of us and so many other people. So first things first, who is Pedro Santana, right? I don't know if Grandma wants to take that question or let one of us rock out, but do you have an answer to who Pedro Santana was?
Well, to me, Pedro was an educator that made an impact on many students. I dare say all the students that he ever came across, and adults also, teachers, friends, his family. Just yesterday, his sister said that they've never been the same, and it's already been 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, for me, Pedro, it's always kind of hard because I always just remember pockets of him just showing up with his long hair when I was younger. And I'm like, oh, this crazy old dude is here. And he wasn't that old, but when I'm 6 years old, I'm seeing, like some of the people say in his movie, Michael Jackson's here, our own Michael Jackson's here. And, as I got older and that final year of his life, I really got to know him a lot more than just pockets in my life. He was special. He was a mentor. He was inspirational. So that's what I would say. He was just an inspirational person that always wanted to do good. So that's who Pedro Santana was in my eyes. So Ivy, what about you?
Yeah, I think Pedro was one of the first clear examples I had of what it looked like to just be an influence, to have influence on your family, on your community, on your sphere of influence, and without effort. He was somebody who just leaked influence. You wanted to be around him. You wanted to tell him your deepest, darkest secret because there's just a warmth that he always had. And that warmth was a powerful thing. And he knew how to use it for the glory of the Lord, which is super cool. So I'm excited to talk about this because it gets to shed light on the legacy that he's left behind.
It was like magic. Like whenever we were around him, everybody wanted to talk to him. And he always had a word for everybody also. Young, old, right. For whoever was in that room, he had something to say.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, a hug and a kiss. I'm someone who believes that, hugging could make someone's day. A simple hug someone might need that. I've been told from a few people that I'm one of the best huggers. And, I always believed that, but hearing Pedro say he always greets everyone with a hug and a kiss, you see that in the movie. You know, he just wasn't afraid to have vulnerability, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing that people in this world really need to work on. And so just to see someone who was not scared and did not care about what other people thought about him as long as he knew he was doing the right thing, you know, that's what I remember of him. So let's talk about My Name is Pedro and why he wanted this thing to be made in the first place. You know, this is something that people could go watch on Amazon. They could rent the movie and then check it out there and just see what we're talking about if they haven't had the experience of watching this before. But
it's also completely free on YouTube. Just type in My Name is Pedro. It'll be one of the first options there. And you press play. It's free. You can watch it.
Yeah. So let's talk about why he wanted this in the first place, because the thing about what this documentary is it's a documentary and life changes the way things are going. This was never supposed to be a documentary that ended the way that it did, you know? The reason why this documentary was made changed as it was being made. So originally, I don't even know what year this began from between Pedro and the director Lillian LaSalle. So for someone who may have been there for its conceptualization, Grandma, why do you think he wanted this? What was the purpose of this documentary?
Well, when he was growing up, he wanted to be an actor. He always wanted to be an actor. So he had that air about him that he was acting, you know, wherever he went, it was like watching a movie. When he was even in a movie in the 80s or whatever. I don't remember the name of the movie, but I know that he was in a movie. And he also wanted to tell a story. He wanted people to think outside the box, especially the students, anybody, to think you could do it. You know, not because you're confined or you don't have riches or you're very poor or whatever it was. He wanted you to be yourself, to say whatever you had to say. And he pushed that. He pushed that all the time. And he wanted to make a movie about that, about going for it, you know?
Right. I mean, that is very much what that movie feels like when it's focused on Pedro and his work in the education field, you know? So since you brought it up, let's talk about his beginnings, right? The movie tells us where he came from, his family situation, growing up with other siblings, not just two siblings, like 5, you know, growing up in the Bronx, you know. I've grown up in the Bronx. Grandma's grown up in the Bronx. IB was in the Bronx enough to know what it's like to grow up in the Bronx. So we are all connected to Pedro in that sense. We know what it's like. But what does growing up in the Bronx look like? And why is it significant to the story of who Pedro became?
Yeah.
You know, for me, I'm just going to say that, you know, when we grow up in the Bronx and especially in the areas we're in, considered the ghetto and things like that, chances that are given to kids in this community already and the eyes that are on us, there aren't many that believe we'll grow up to be successful, especially when we're grown up with 5 siblings in a 2-parent household, but daddy got to sneak out because we need the checks that say that he's not around, you know? So, you know, that's why, for me, that's why it's important for Pedro's story, because when you see where he gets to later, his beginnings are amazing. And he defied the odds, you know, and everybody in that family did. So, well, what do you think about his beginnings? How does that make you feel? Why do you think it's important to his legacy to know where he came from, like the movie portrayed?
Important because as a child, he was considered a special education child, a child with needs. And a teacher that he had believed in him. And she's the one that kind of pushed him along, and also wanting to get out of there, wanting to do better. He chose to stick it out in school, go to college, and go on to become an educator. First, he became an educator. He took time off to go to Africa with America, teach America, something like that.
Yep.
Then when he came back, he got really involved and became an assistant principal. And that's when he could do. Pedro knew every child's name in the morning when the gates opened. He was right there to shake the hands of the boys and give the girls a hug. That's what he wanted to do. I think that's part of his legacy. And sure enough, to this day, I see students and out there or whatever, and they always have something, a word. They always have a word.
Right. So his beginnings resemble and mirror the people that he would later mentor. Because they came from the same neighborhood. That's what made it also so important. Because we have people that come in to make these decisions about our lives that they don't understand what it was like to be us, but he did. What about you, Ivy? Do you have any thoughts about why his beginnings, special ed, low income family, 5-sibling household, why is that so important for people to know?
I just think it's important because of what you just said, right? It's the relatability. It's the fact that not only can you shoot for the stars and accomplish it, but to see someone who knew why they wanted to shoot for the stars. You know, a lot of times people have high aspirations just based off of what can come with those aspirations. But Pedro was always somebody who knew exactly what kind of a mark he wanted to leave in every situation, in every relationship, in every moment. And I think that somebody like that is important to see and is an excellent role model to both kids and adults. You know what I mean? His peers, even his quote unquote enemies or the people against him in his movement, he killed them with kindness. And I think that where he comes from and where he came from plays a role in why he was able to move with such humility. And I think that's something all of us can learn from.
And you know, Lillian LaSalle kind of put a bug in his ear because she saw Pedro's picture with an article about principal going to the prom, I think it was, and she called his school. And she wanted to interview him. She said, "When can I come?" And he said, "Oh, you could come tomorrow." And when she got there, that was it. It was. She said, "This man, I'm gonna follow him," and she followed him. I want to say 7 years or something. It took. She went, followed him, kept writing and interviewing all of us, and then, like Willie said, the story changed because it was supposed to be like a movie. And then it turned out to be a documentary because he got sick on us. Yeah. Just when he was going on another step, he was on his way
another journey
to be principal of principals.
Right.
And everything changed. But it changed for the better, I want to say, because in the 7 months that he was sick, he brought us together. But a lot of people that didn't have any purpose decided, wow, if he could do it, I could do it,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so since we begun to speak about like his tenure as teacher and principal, he fought his way to become these roles, forcing his way into teachers college. He didn't give up. He didn't let, the movie talks about how he got his letter saying, we don't have space for you. And he's like, I don't accept that. I'm going to meet with whoever I need to meet with. I'm going to meet with the head person and he's going to tell me no. And I'm going to say, no, pull up a panel. And the panel is like, welcome. He was a fighter and he fought his way to become a teacher for many years, alongside you, because he worked in your school, then an assistant principal, and then a principal. So because you've actually had the luxury of working alongside him, can you just speak about how he was in those roles? Because from what I see in the movie, because I was never one of his students, I can't think of principals that were the way he was. I would be lucky if I saw the 4 or 5 principals I've had in my life. Only one of them were walking around outside their office. And even then, the interactions were always professional based in the sense of, well, how are your grades? And you need to get them up, suit and tie, no dancing in the hallways and complimenting someone based on just their smile or anything like that. So how was he in his role as a teacher and principal, and why did that stick with students at the time?
Well, he was very he had compassion for the students. He was strict and they had expectations, but so he also loved them and came down to their level. He never he never humiliated anybody. Like, an adult can be sometimes humiliating to a child. Never. He always, even when he was being a disciplinarian, he still was showing love. His office door was never closed. Never. You will walk in there and sometimes you will find 7 students on the floor working on their projects. The last time that he was a principal on Webster, I remember going one day to visit, and there he was doing some science projects. It's Evelonia, hurry up, get down there and help this boy do this. Or always, he was an open book. He told it like it was. And the parents, they loved him because of the way he was. He used to go to people's houses. I'll tell you a quick little story. When he was at 279, the 8th graders decided they were going to have a hooky party. And whoever didn't go, that decided to tattled. And Pedro went right across the street, knocked on the door where the party was. And when they looked through the peephole, they saw Mr. Santana. He said, "There's no way out. You can't run out through the fire escape. Open the door." And there he was. He marched every single one of them to school. He might have called the parents, I don't remember, but he took care of it. Another time, we were at the prom, 8th grade prom, and the boys were all hanging out around a tree. And when they all went into the prom, I said, "I think that we should go see why they were by the tree." And sure enough, we found a little bit of alcohol, and he kind of took care of it. We poured it out, we put water in there, and we left it. And that's how he fixed it. Nobody ever said a word. He was just him, Pedro. He was a loving person, someone that cared also.
Yeah. I mean, we see in the film, they mention that he was very personal with his students. There's a boy in the film named Isaiah, not this Isaiah, it's a different Isaiah.
Yes.
Who he would say, even after I graduated, he was, "Pull up your grades. I know you have a website. Pull them up. Let's check. I know I have nothing to say about them, but I just want to see." And we also see him go to a girl's house when she hasn't done her work. And he's not there speaking with the mother about the disciplinary actions that need to be had at home. No, he's communicating with the girl.
Right.
We can, you still have time to do this. Let's get it done. And then they start talking outside of that. "Do you want to see my kids? Look at my kids. Here's Hudson. Here's Alexa," and that just shows that he wasn't focused on punishments. Some argue that maybe he should be, but I think what we see in the film is appreciation from the students and a willingness for them to keep going because of how the situation was handled. He says it in the car ride when they're asking him about the interaction. "What do you think she's going to do?" And he says, "I mean, I know she'll be thinking that she needs to do something. And she knows that I'm going to contact her on Wednesday to see what the deal is. After that, I don't know. But I just know that the thought is in there now. And if he went in there and said, 'Yo, you need to do this,' to her mom, 'You need to fix this,' that train of thought would not be there."
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and it's great that we have you to speak on this as someone who was a loving friend to Pedro, but also a coworker of his. You have that ability to fill in those gaps. IV, do you have anything that you want to say about what the film brought to your eyes as who he was as an educator?
Absolutely. I think, he was a natural teacher, and what's crazy about it is, he would bend the curriculum of life to teach people. And that's what's evident. That whole story right there, and that whole scene, and the way that he just knows how to, okay, how can I get on your level, look you eye to eye, and leave an impression on you that will create or invite you into change, it's so beautiful. I think the best teachers, you know, it reminds me of, as I was watching, it reminded me of my daughter, right? Like, I can't force my daughter to, she's 2. I can't force her to do things and think that that's going to teach her. Instead, I have to level with her and give her something to explore and journey with her.
Mhm.
And that is what Pedro did through everything he did. He was just a natural, I will journey with you. I've journeyed so much. Don't worry. The journey isn't going to kill you. That you can overcome the journey. Let's journey together. That concept is so special. And a lot of people talk that talk, but this guy lived it. Every step he took, every word that left his mouth, it had that in it. So
When he was a assistant principal in our school, the 8th graders had to do an exit project. They had to get it together with whatever they were going to do and present. And then we would sit in the library, we would have a panel, and he would let them put on their show. These were kids that were not interested, that used to come to school just because they had to, because it was a law. And when Pedro was there, these kids would come in dressed like if they were going to go to an office and present their project, and he would just applaud them, and that made them want to do more. Oh, I'm going to high school. I'm going to finish. I'm going to go to college. And the girl and the boy that you talked about, that's what they did because of that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
of course I had the parents that were pushing them, but Pedro gave them that you can do it by giving them the background. All the kids in the school knew where he came from. He never pretended to be this guy from Rockland that was they knew exactly that he grew up in the Bronx, that he came from a dysfunctional family, the whole thing. Never cover up. He was always true.
Yeah, transparent,
Yes,
authentic,
he was
Right.
transparent.
accessible, very accessible.
And
Yes.
And that's the issue with teachers or principals or people with any level of authority or power. Sometimes you forget your humble beginnings, or you forget that there is a idea of like a gap between you and the student.
Mhm.
But he just so seamlessly broke that barrier, just so seamlessly reached out and it's crazy. When the movie starts and you see that room, you see how many people. I love also just, it's Cuzzo-OP. We talking movie, but like what I love about the documentary as well is because of how the story was found along his journey and everything, the idea to start with the influence and how much of an impact it made and then go back and figure out how that influence got there. It just makes it even more tremendous. It's like legacy the whole time. So
Right.
it's very cool. But
yeah, even now that he's gone, he used to ask some stuff, expectations of his children, but he never drowned them. He never drilled them, and sure enough, they're successful. We have a Dr. Santana in the midst right now. So
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just to speak on more of what the movie presented as his time during an educator in those ways, the IKEA cards. The concept that when you change the atmosphere, you change the mood, and when the mood is changed, the expectations, the understandings, the acceptance, the willingness to move forward changes too. Throwing out the furniture that you would typically find in a principal's office and putting couches and circular tables that you go in to talk with the principal and he's not writing in a notebook. He has a Expo Sharpie marker that he's writing on the glass table with, right? He's curveballing what you're expecting to see when you walk in, and it kind of unbalances you in a good way.
Yeah.
Because it makes you feel at ease. I would always remember just the concept of having to go down to the office in general, even if it's to go bring an envelope for my teacher, would fill me with this uneasiness because it's so I don't want to say businessy, and it's not, I wouldn't even call it professional, because I think the idea of what is and isn't professional has been so clouded and so gray.
It's more like formal. It just feels very formal.
Like, that's not necessarily the environment that kids deserve to be in during such crucial developmental years of their lives, you know? And watching this documentary back after I want to say a few years without seeing it, for me, you know, when Pedro passed away, I was 14 going into high school. And now I'm almost at the tail end of getting a graduate degree, studied development, like the developmental process in teenagers, specifically because of who I had in my life, like Pedro, during that time. And it's like, they don't need the formality that they're probably going to see for the next 40, 50 years of their lives. They deserve to go through this process professionally with expectations that are high, but like you said, Grandma, not forced upon you.
Right.
And you still deserve to see the colorful environments and have people that authentically believe in you the way he did, versus some other principals that will say they do, but they're getting money to say that, you know? So
I'll tell you,
the IKEA idea was
yeah,
genius from him.
When you were getting ready to go to middle school, we weren't sure, you know, what school to pick. And I told him that you were going to go to the one on Webster. He said, wait a minute, what about Intech? I said, well, I don't know, because that's not our zone school. And, you know, back then they were a little more strict about that. He said, meet me in front of Intake at my lunch hour. I went, met him there. We went right into the principal's office, and he said, I have this young man named Willie Vega. He's going to graduate from PS51, and I want him to come here. He didn't ask. And then the principal, since she was just our Pedro lover also, she said, yes, bring Willie. And Willie went to Intake for middle school and high school. Yeah.
For 7 years.
He wasn't
Yeah.
taking
I mean,
no and stuff.
Right.
You know?
I remember. I remember that. Like,
Crazy.
I'm not going to sit here and say the only reason why I got in was because of him, but like, there were eyes on me when I walked in there because people knew that Pedro Santana had his eye on you. You know, I don't even remember if that's the case for elementary school for me too, because I knew that him and my principal from elementary school were incredibly close. So, Pedro's hand has just been over my life always, you know, and in ways that sometimes you may not even realize. You know, another part of his education career that it was kind of spoken about is the way he liked to handle situations, being, you know, if things are okay between the kids at the end of the day, who cares? Like, why are we so focused on in-house suspensions, expulsions, you know, things like that, when maybe a conversation can just fix it? Why does this child, as the movie brings up, need to be here at 7 a.m.? If he starts working well at noon, why can't we just let him rock in?
True believer.
You know,
yep.
why are we framing this the way that we want it to be, when if it's working for him, why not let it happen? You know, that idea is so foreign nowadays that just hearing it in the movie was incredibly refreshing. To hear that he believed in that boy who couldn't do the 8 o'clock classes and his grades were low, but when he changed them to 12 to 5,
he improved so much. Yep.
He improved. So he was there for the kids, you know? He had someone there for him when he was a kid to teach him how to spell island. And then he was doing that for others. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and what about when he told the boy, my name is Pedro, teaching them English, but he wanted the boy to say, my name is Isaiah, or my name is Willie. And the little boy kept saying, my name is Pedro.
Yeah, he didn't give up. He didn't give up.
No, my name is Pedro. What's your name? You know, and he got it. You know, and that was in a different country. And he was going around. Yeah.
So before we move on to the next section, I want to speak a little bit about different parts of the movie that all come from the same meeting that he had with a group of children in a library, where he's sitting and talking about how he was special ed and how everyone has a purpose, and that purpose is going to drive you. And sometimes it's the way that you find out about your purpose that will really push you forward. He tells the story about how he went to Africa and how he changed seats with a friend of his because he wanted to go at 12 and they wanted to go at 2. And they went up, they tracked the gorillas, they found them. He called them what he called them because, you know, he got no filter around them kids. He was calling one of them a poop master, which is hilarious. He had the whole room laughing because that's just who he was. But then he tells a very serious story in a way that doesn't feel as heavy on these kids, which is beautiful. And he talks about how, unfortunately, the car that he would have taken hit a landmine.
Yep.
And it caused the woman sitting in his seat to lose her legs and 30% of her face. And he spoke about how scary it was, but he also sees the beauty in everything, and he knows that, you know, he has purpose here that he needs to get going.
Right.
So, you know, for IV, how was it to see that story and hear that story? Because I know that purpose is something that we've spoken about a few times here. And so what do you think of that part of this documentary, and what do you think that that's trying to tell? Because it's broken up specifically to match the flow of the documentary. You know, the way that this documentary is edited is brilliant. It's a brilliant decision by Lillian to cut it up the way she did. So
yeah, I think the theme of just the theme of persistence, of overcoming, of conquering, you know, that's what's at the core of the whole documentary. And it's because it was a result of Pedro's life. It was a goal, and then the impression that he made on others. So when he told that story, you know, it's got a sprinkle of favor and God on him and all of that. But she didn't lean into just that. She opened it up to a concept the same way he opened it up to those kids. This idea of, let me cherish the life that I have and do something important with this, because I could have been the one that was in that situation. And my life could have been in a completely different direction. And so I think that's what's cool is, like, he was comfortable with his own story and with who he was. That's what it is. The reason why he was so warm and so attractive was because he was okay with who he was.
Right.
Himself.
Exactly.
He was okay with himself.
And I think that that's big, right? All of us, he just wanted everyone else to be okay with who they were too.
Right.
And that's what he did in that story where he's speaking to those kids. He's giving them this opportunity to take ownership of their lives in a way that's meaningful. And I think that's what I liked about how it was threaded through the entire documentary. That concept, that theme, you see it in everything, right. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely touched me for sure when I watched it back this week.
Yeah. Yeah. The out of the box concept is where we spoke about earlier, that's where that comes from, that compiled the library discussion. He asked the kids who thinks they're out of the box, and they all raised their hand, which is beautiful, because not everybody would be willing to openly admit that.
Right.
Or some want to be a part of it, like he said. You know, he had great love for the kids, and it was just beautiful. Like we've said plenty of times, inspirational. So let's dive into, I don't want to call it the problem of the film, but there's definitely a section of this movie that has it out for Pedro in a certain manner that it's like,
there are antagonists.
Here's the antagonist of this film. Here's where this documentary becomes a roadblock for him, that we kind of have to see how he gets over this, because not everybody gets over roadblocks well. And so he is appointed as assistant superintendent of East Ramapo, I believe.
Yes.
And we know that the decision to hire who they hired as superintendent was made with, we're just going to call it bias as well as false information that got that person the role. And for the next year, it was a series of conflicts from personal issues that I remember happening live when I was a child, just hearing the story that you would tell and like the just emotional highs of that time of his personal journey that we're gonna just let the movie tell that part,
Right.
to focus on the more educational side of things. What happened in his personal life kind of trickled down, being released to the public, putting eyes onto Pedro, start looking at his certifications, realizing, oh, he might not have everything he needs to be operating here. Let's try to get him out.
Exactly.
And the community that he was a part of overseeing was kind of split in two, between the public schools and the private schools, with the culture behind the private school wanting him out. And so during this part of the movie, we're seeing a battle between the public and what they want for Pedro and the other side, with Pedro almost taking a back seat in this part of the movie, waiting to see how he actually feels and just letting it showcase what everyone else around him feels. So during the section of the movie, how are you feeling seeing the back and forth here, and again Pedro's removal, just letting him be a character during this point without really diving into what he was feeling?
Grandma, before you go, because you're gonna go, honestly, I was brought back to Oppenheimer, bro. I'm not even gonna lie. I was brought back to the last act of Oppenheimer, because they have that trial, this concept of two forces to going against each other in a legal sense, but you know that the battle slighted in certain degrees. And I just think like it's crazy to watch it back when you were so close to the situation. And it's also like really awesome that it's documented, because this happens more. Pedro became an advocate now. Now he's an advocate through his life. And that's crazy. Like that's a crazy concept to see that his influence put him in this position, that this is a living, breathing documentary that was never planned for. It's just journey.
Yes.
And then this is just another part of the documentary that speaks to more influence that he ends up having, even on the other end of the loss, which is crazy. So I'll let you go, Grandma, but I was geeked out. I'm not gonna lie.
So, I mean, before Grandma goes, I'm also going to just say, Grandma mentioned something earlier about how even the community that felt like it was against him was affected by him. And there was one person during this section of the movie who comes from the community that was fully against Pedro. He goes to that mic and he says, listen, y'all could look at me right here. I'm a part of that group. We need this man. I've seen the support of the people that he has touched, and they've touched my heart during this process. And yeah, we see the rest of the people on that board, and we could already see on their faces, they were not trying to hide what they were feeling. They wore it on their faces about where this was heading. But this man, I got to give him credit, because not everybody would have taken, knowing that this was not going to go Pedro's way. He still stood up and said what he needed to say and what he felt compelled to say. Right. And that's strength. That's strength to be able to stand up and do that. So do you want to talk about this specific section of the movie? Because I know that it can become incredibly emotionally
It was
heavy.
heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. And the irony about it is that it was the same people that came to the Bronx to visit his school, to shadow him as a principal, and convinced him to go to Rockland.
Sheesh.
And then because of personal stuff, they decided they were gonna take him out. And the thing is, the way they did it was so.
It was
You would
malicious.
think that you wouldn't live I don't think I would have ever been able to see something like that. Because when you're being raised, they don't raise you with differences, or at least not in my house. And then when you see it in real life, you live it. It's heartbreaking. That was heartbreaking. What happened there with Pedro at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. I mean,
But at the
and
same time, this was an opportunity for his whole mantra and motto of learning despite your circumstances.
Right.
He got to put it on the road before all the people, it's
Mhm.
crazy because
Mhm.
it's like, that's how it is. And honestly, bro, I know we don't even get like into faith over here at Cuzzo-OP, but that is as Christ-like as it gets. It doesn't really get more Christ-like than that, the prophet not being welcome in his own home, the person that the people want, but somehow then he has to die in his process
Mhm.
for everyone to recognize the power of that influence. That's literally the legacy of Pedro.
Mhm.
It's crazy the
Mhm.
way that it's perfectly depicted through this documentary, especially. But
Coming up on April 20th, on his April 20th, 10 years ago, he showed, he expressed faith to me, on April 19th. And like you said, yes, it was like Christ-like, because all the stuff that he did, and then criticism and all that, and he took it all in stride, and that was it. He was going to do nobody was going to stop him from being an influence. Like, he was an influencer back then,
Yep.
Yeah.
It just wasn't on
Yeah.
TikTok.
Yeah, OG.
Yeah.
But he was on everybody's heart and everybody's life.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, when we see the outcome of his trial
Mhm.
going up against the board, again, they kept how he felt hidden until the end, until they passed and they said, "Yeah, you're out of here, buddy." He walked out and he hugged the people that were crying, and he was like, "Yo, let's go to dinner. I don't have a job, but let's go to dinner." And you begin to see through this man handling this situation as positively as he can, because he know that you got to move forward. You can't let this break you down. You can't let this take your inspiration away. Because of the incident at home that occurred with him, we know that he was kind of put on pause. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to continue progressing forward. He wasn't able to find a new job because when you got that markdown, they were trying to take that away, and they kept delaying it. And so he set out on a new path, right? He went to Africa. We've heard a little bit already here tonight about how he went there and he started teaching the kids and telling them their name. And so in this part of the movie, and the documentary, at least I should say, we get to see him outside of his own neighborhood, or the neighborhood where people know him or know of him. He is now a stranger in a new land that he always wanted to go to. This might have been his second time. And now he's in his element once again with people that need it just as much as anybody else does. And he didn't let a language barrier stop him. He was on a different continent. So his time in Africa, I remember when he disappeared for a few years and then showed back up. I can specifically remember him peacing out, because he liked to dip out in the funniest ways. He'd go, "All right, bye. I'm out of here. See you in however long."
It's like almost like an Irish goodbye, but without it being Irish. Yeah, facts.
Right. Like, you can feel how you feel about me leaving, but I'm gone. Peace. So I want to start with you, Isaiah. His time in Africa, what do you think that was about, and why is it important to showcase what he was able to do in lands far away just as much as it was to showcase his own home?
Don't even get me started, bro. Don't even get me started on the symbolism of him going to Africa and then coming back and being, for me, what it is it's like, there's stories of what they call the desert fathers, these contemplative thinkers that just went into the desert and they did nothing but spend time with their own mind outside of their normal environment. And in that place, they felt like they drew a lot closer to God, but mainly had a deeper understanding of themselves. And I think that that's a lot of what this trip was for him. It's not like he's perfect. It's not that he didn't have worries and pains based on what had happened to him. I think when he went and he did that, he found a way to take how he was feeling, address it, and then channel it into a place that's meaningful. He didn't want to let that influence die, and he didn't. I think that the flame was amplified even more so out there, and that's what's so beautiful about it. And I think that's why it was important to have it as a part of the documentary as well. I think it just proves that, one, it's not like he's a fluke in the space that he's in where the influence was already established, or even in the Bronx. No, this guy could go to a whole nother country where they don't have, and you watch him walking between the schools, and he walks with authority and influence, and they follow him and they run after him and they respond to him. And it's just like, yo, you're a truly special person. Like you're such a special man. It's crazy. And you could be from this side of the world or that side of the world, but we got to recognize that as humans, you're a special dude. That's why that's a special part of the documentary for sure. That's probably one of my favorite parts.
Fair, right. Now, about you, Grandma, what do you take of his journey to Africa and how the film presented it as the next step in his long journey?
I really don't. It was part of him. Like for me, I took it for granted that he would do something like that because that's the way he was. He he always had a mission, a mission. He always had a mission with a child or an adult or a place. He needed to go and do something or say something, plant a seed or whatever it was that he was going to do. Yeah,
Yeah,
even
like
even in his last days, he not even in his last days, before, when we would go to the doctor, to the hospital, the whole floor, the whole place used to have to come to where this man was, just to hear him either saying something serious or being silly, but it was something that people were compelled to come and see him and say hello. And one day at the clinic, there was a woman there, and he introduced himself or whatever, and then they called her, and she said to him, "Can you wait until I come back so we could continue speaking?" Because she loved how he was talking to her. You know, that's the way.
yeah.
That's the way it was.
Yeah, I mean, he said it in the documentary in the car ride that he makes it his business to speak to a total, complete stranger because you never know. You never know. And I love that. I'm not going to say I do that every time I go out, but I do think it's important to at least try to dig into somebody just a little bit during every one of your conversations.
While he was sick, we used to walk the mall. That was the exercise on
The
Thursdays. We would
Palisades.
walk the mall. And we used to go into Pandora, always into Pandora. And the workers there, as soon as he walked in, Pedro, everybody would stop working because Pedro came to Pandora. Costco, the little old ladies waiting outside for the van to pick them up. There he was sitting down talking to the little old ladies there. I learned so much from him that
Yeah, like
even as an adult, I learned so many things from him. He never um stopped me from like doing something, or for example, at school. When I was hired, I was an educational assistant. But when I got to school every day, whatever he asked that was needed to be done, I did. So I learned. As I grew in my schooling, I learned a lot of stuff from him.
Yeah.
Because he will let you do, you know, walk with you by your side, hold your hand, and get you to learn something new or be expressive or whatever.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, he used to come here at 6 o'clock in the morning every day to drop off his dog. to this house, and he would talk to Willie for a few minutes. He was just Pedro.
Yeah, it's crazy. And since we've begun to brought it up, and after his time in Africa, he comes home and time has passed, and I remember going to his house for the 4th of July and celebrating the 4th of July in his pool and just hanging out. I think it was at his house, or it might have been his sister's house. It was his sister's house, and I remember that was 2013 4th of July.
Yep.
And he's got this big job offer, the superintendent role. Was it superintendent or assisted?
I think he was going to be a principal of principals.
Okay. In Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the Bronx, East Ramapo, Africa, and now we're talking Dubai. And so he's getting prepared for his trip. I believe this was scheduled to be a 3-year-long trip where he was going to go and do that. He said, later Gators, his family. That's
exactly what.
I'm out of here, I love you, and I'm going to love you from all the way
over there.
Dubai.
Yeah.
But first, he had to do his doctor's appointments. And this is where Miss Evelyn here herself makes her little movie star appearance in the documentary.
That's right. Sitting at the same spot she's sitting at right now.
Right now. Yes, crazy. Sir. And you were asking him like, yo, what's up? You're not gonna come and say bye? He's like, yeah, I am, but I have some things I need to do first. And this is where the movie tells us, and we find out that he has been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I remember when, because there were people that when the movie starts, like Isaiah said, and then as it wraps back around in the Nyack Center, where he tells people. But I knew, obviously, because of we're family and all, before. And I remember what that felt like. I remember, seeing pictures of the day that you guys were going to see him. And I'm like, oh, that's cool that they out there. I'm in 8th grade. And then to hear all of that come back was kind of shocking, right? Because we know that things like this happen, unfortunately. And it's always almost feels like, as much as we never expected, it always kind of feels like it happens to the people that you don't expect it to happen to. Mm-hmm. And so it canceled his trip, and it started a different journey for Pedro. And this is what we're meaning when we say that this documentary could have never planned for this to be some of the journey that it would be capturing. And so, as he gets this diagnosis, lives are changed, right? I mean, for you, Grandma, you took up the role of a caretaker every Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go, play hooky from school and spend some time there. And, that was hard. It was hard to deal with. And the movie, what it does at this point is, you begin to see Pedro less. And there's a great beauty in the music and the animation drawing style of this film to tell the rest of this story the way that it needs to be told well enough. And the animation up to this point had always been used when he's talking about the gorillas. It draws the gorillas and the island of Puerto Rico and Africa and all of this. But now at this point, its stylized use is also serving the purpose of carrying this movie past the point where, we don't want to show Pedro the way he was after he had gotten sick. Mm-hmm. Because after that Nyack Center, things did change, and as it does when you're being treated. And so whether or not this is a discussion we wish to have, we can or we cannot. But I just want to say, for me, those months dealing with his cancer, it was sad, but it was also it was enjoyable because it was filled with love and just joy and laughter, game nights, movies, conversations. Pedro loved Star Wars. I mean, behind me, I have nothing but a wall of Star Wars behind me. Those are posters, lightsabers, just joyful conversations, spending time with his son Hudson, watching The Walking Dead for the first time. Like, pieces a part of me. Without Pedro, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So what are those months, if you wish to share? What do you recall, and how does it feel to know like that the movie and the documentary handled that time with such grace too? And either one of you guys, if you want to take that.
During that time that you were saying, people came together. The distances were brought together. His family got closer. Even though he was sick, they spent beautiful time together. And I used to go, I used to bring you guys, even the babies, I used to bring them. It just made like I don't even know what to say. It just knitted everybody to one whole group there. Everybody looked forward to going to the game night or to go see him or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
always was the funniest. Like he was always
Yeah.
the joker. The
Yeah.
always to the very end.
No,
Mm.
that's no kidding. I mean, even when he was a kid and wasn't trying to be funny, the documentary talks about how he almost killed his sister. And the way he tells that
Yeah.
story is just so funny. God
Yes.
damn it. I'll be right there. He was always the clown. So, I mean, Isaiah, do you want to
I have a
speak on
video
this?
of him accusing
Oh,
me of trying to
oh,
kill him. I have a video that
oh.
he's telling in the hospital, and one that said, "What
Mm-hmm.
happened?" And he said she was trying to kill me. She something about a pizza. I don't even remember what it was, but I have a video of him telling the story to everybody in the
Mm-mm-mm.
hospital room. And I remember saying to his sisters, "I don't know why you guys came, because you guys don't know how to take care of him. Like I thought I was the
Dang.
only one that could take care of him."
Wow.
Yeah. I have a few videos, as a matter of fact, of the game nights and yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. I mean, just moment of vulnerability. I remember thinking at that time, like, yo, after his passing, putting portraits together and pictures and thinking to myself, I don't have a picture with this man. Like, I'm not in a picture with him. And it saddened me very deeply. Like, I don't have a picture of him and I together. And then 2 or 3 weeks after, I think it was you or someone just sends a picture of one of the game nights, and I'm sitting right next to him on
Yep,
that floor, and just the
yep.
joy that I felt to know that that
Mm-hmm.
existed, I was like, oof. And that changed me forever, because now I'm like, when I'm around people, I take pictures. I make sure that selfie or something, I got to have a picture with
Mm-hmm.
people, because now that's always in my mind from
Mm-hmm.
here on out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm grateful for it. My grandmother, not you, obviously, passed away on Easter Sunday, the same way Pedro did 10 years ago. She passed away this year, and the last time I saw her, I caught a selfie with her,
Mm-hmm.
because I've been doing that. And I'm grateful that that Pedro experience has changed how I interact with people, because now I have that to look back on.
Right.
So it's beautiful, through the sadness, there's beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Ivy, do you want to add or
Yeah,
no?
I mean, I think on one end is a level of, I started going to college that year. I was freshman, sophomore, and I wasn't as present for those moments, those game nights, and I have regrets over that. I have regrets over missing the opportunity to be in that space, and the way that it marked you guys is everything. I think what's beautiful about that stitching of the family is he spent his whole life influencing so many different pockets of people and communities of people. But those last moments of his life, he got to influence what mattered most,
Mm-hmm.
which was his family. And I love how the documentary decides not to show him. I think that was the right move. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the screening and his desire for an unfinished showing of the documentary, it just left all of us with this massive reminder. I mean, I'm in the clip looking stupefied. You know what I mean? Like
staring at their
just
screen. They
straight
put that
Mhm.
emphasis
stupefied.
on
Mhm.
you, bro. Yeah.
And
I'm in the background, bro. You got the spotlight for a few seconds. You know what I'm saying?
I
I'm just in the background talking.
I have my mouth open. Like I'm like, like stupefied by the story. And yeah, man, it's fuck cancer. You know what I mean? This is
Mhm.
always gonna be the case. We've had
Right.
cancer pop up a number of times in our
Mhm.
lives here as family. So that's always going to be my posture toward it. But it also is, again, another place where he wasn't going to let that define him. He wasn't going to let it not be something. He wasn't going to let it be something that inhibited him learning, him still growing, him still helping others grow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't even that couldn't hold him. You know.
Mhm. I told the story on. I went to his family this week, and I told a story about Isa. I when Pedro was sick, that was 10 years ago. So Isa was what, 14 years old, and at 14, she was a little withdrawn. She kind of didn't like people. Her puberty or whatever you want to call it was like that. That she pulled away. She would be in her room. She wasn't so affectionate. And for the first time, I heard her say, I love you. And it was to Pedro. She was on her knees. He was laying on the couch and she was like near his face and he was giving her advice. And she said, I love you. And I'll never forget that I had never heard it. Now she says it all the time. But that was the first time that I ever heard it during that time of her, that he even pulled that out of her, you know?
Yeah, he made
Yeah.
an impression there too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's all beautiful, so after his passing, right, I remember saying my goodbyes maybe a week before his passing because he was being transferred from the hospital that was pretty close to a different state, and so I knew it was the last time I would be seeing him, and he shared words with me that I'll never forget.
Mm-hmm.
And he passes away Easter Sunday, and we have already scheduled this celebration, and no
Mm,
funerals, no wakes,
right.
this celebration of life. That's gonna be it. It's in the documentary. We get to see everyone there. He passes away at age 47, and we get to watch the unfinished cut of this movie. I remember going, and it starts the background of it was starting from Africa. It was everything kind of past there, and just that spiced up. But to have a theater that big booked out to the point where people are standing on the sides, we're talking maybe what, 3, 4, 500, maybe
It
more
was
people.
700 people.
That is craziness to think that he's not. Well, he is a movie star, but he's not no millions of. No, this is some dude that just did good things
Just looked all 700 of those people in the eye.
and
That's
did
who he
something.
is.
Exactly.
He hugged them. He held their hand. He looked
Right,
them in the
right.
face and saw them.
So after that, we had to return to normalcy, right?
Mhm.
Just knowing that this world lost someone that changed it for the better, and we go to the mall still and we talk about him to this
Mhm.
day, and we look back at pictures and read text messages
Mhm.
and share laughs with his family and everything. You know what I'm saying? Like 10 years later, we're still sitting here talking about this man,
Absolutely.
and the legacy of this man. And so, as one of the final things that we're discussing here, legacy, we've talked about his legacy. The film asks him, what do you want your legacy to be? And he talks about his son and his daughter, and they're doing great nowadays. His legacy is continuing forward. Awesome. He talks about just what he hopes people remember him for. And we're remembering him to this day. He was honored that year, Pedro Santana Day, October 31st, I believe,
Oh,
right?
yes, at the NCAA, something like that. I can't remember it. Yes, I went to that ceremony.
Yeah. So his legacy, we can talk about it for all of us. And like I kind of brought up in the beginning, for me, he was a huge motivator in my life. You know, he showed me what it was like to have influence over people that need good influences in their life at the age that they're at. You know, the career that I want to move into, he's one of the very few people that I can say have pushed me in this direction without pushing me in this direction.
Right.
Just by being who he was, I progress forward every day wanting to do that.
Yeah.
So for me, his legacy on my life will forever be just helping teenagers believe in themselves and love themselves and progress forward. And then for anybody, it's just love.
That's right. It's love. It's lingering a little longer. It's being curious about the people around you. It's recognizing the sphere of influence that you have, and that to be successful primarily should really be to make an impact on that sphere of influence with who you are. It all starts there. Everything else that we dream and aspire to obtain at some point, it all really doesn't matter if you fail that first part, you know, and Pedro maximized on that first part everywhere he went. And that's how you pack out a theater of 700 people for a documentary and truly become the movie star you always want.
Yep.
With a red carpet, with a red carpet.
His legacy is learner, being a learner of life.
I don't know if you guys have watched the little different clips of people speaking about him.
Yeah,
those are some of them are really, yeah, they did that at my school. We did them on Saturdays. People would come and Lillian would ask questions. Yeah, just everything that we're saying, they also said like that, you know?
Yeah. To this day, I'm incredibly grateful that what I said did not make it anywhere public. I felt like a fool after Lillian had spoken to me, and so
what did you say, bro?
I would love the chance to redo that if Lillian is listening to this. Don't worry about what I said. I just sound so foolish, and I'm glad that it didn't make the cut because I regretted it. I know, and I'm asking her, don't put that out there. I regret everything I said in that, and I need to redo that. We could digitally de-age me and stuff like that, you know. But Grandma, do you have anything that you want to say about his legacy on you, or just whatever you think about that?
No, all I could say is that he was a brother to me. He was a great friend, a great boss, and I learned a lot from him. Even as an adult, I learned many things, you know? He was like my we used to vent. I used to vent to him and he would vent to me. And so even his sister would say, what did he tell you? Or and between me and him. And then I loved how he treated everyone at work, his employees. He was the perfect boss. Yeah. And many now want to be like Pedro.
Yeah.
A lot of his teachers that went on to become principals, they're doing a pretty good job of being like Mr. Santana.
Yeah. Yep. I still want to go down that road one day. I'm on a different journey right now, but I'll be there one day, hopefully. And the kind of last thing, the movie, the documentary, whatever we want to call it, because he's a movie star, so I'm gonna call it a movie. You know what I'm saying? It asks a variety of people, who was your Pedro? So I don't know if y'all can think of that on the spot, because I'm cheating a little bit. I didn't give y'all those notes. Y'all didn't know I was gonna ask this, but with the honoring to the documentary about this man and asking these kids, who was your Pedro? Do you guys have Pedros in your lives besides him that you could look back and say, yeah, it's that teacher that affected me? And I'm willing to go first. I'll give y'all some time to think. In Tech Academy, you know, I had a teacher from 8th grade to 11th grade history every year. And I was in her room daily for lunch. We would talk about whatever, whether it be, yo, you need to pass that class, I know, or if I just unfortunately cursed a teacher out and then walked out of their room angrily and walked into her room, you know, she would sit and discuss with me my emotions and then send my ass back upstairs to go apologize to that teacher, because at the end of the day, that's not okay, you know? Arlene Davis, you know, she is that for me, you know, besides Pedro, just understanding of how much of a role an adult who can play an impact on a teenager growing up. That's who she is for me. So that's who my Pedro is. So shout outs to Miss Davis. And yeah.
I'll go next, Grandma. You can have some more time to think. Yeah, I think for me, I've got two guys. It was in college, Dr. Turk and Brad McDuffie, Professor McDuffie. Both of them English professors. And for me, I think it was I was picking my life back up after thinking I was going to be a doctor, and so beautifully failing out of the nursing program. Just clawing my way toward whatever progress looks like, and not really sure of that after feeling like a failure. Those two guys were guys who met me where I was at, and specifically Dr. Turk taught me the beauty of my life as a story, and the fact that, you know, you can always change the way the story goes. And that was a really big lesson for me that I've never let go of. And then Brad McDuffie, he changed the way I see story in general. I'll never see story the same ever again. The threads, the nuances of a book, of a movie, of a TV show, of a video game, of an album, of my own self, of someone like Pedro. I'll never look at it the same. Those two guys helped me to find wonder in that. And I think I've been using that wonder ever since. So I'd say those two, Dr. Turk and McDuff.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, for listeners, Ivy and I went to the same college, different times, and some same times. But yeah, Dr. Turk makes complete sense. I could see that. And I could low-key see him being maybe your mom's too. Maybe.
That's the crazy thing.
But how about you, Grandma? Do you have a Pedro?
I have one Pedro and then three Pedros together. My Pedro is Jack Roberts. I met Jack Roberts in 1983 at a street meeting. And that's the day that I found Christ, or Christ found me. And since that I started that walk, he was always the same, always full of love, always saying the right thing, and always patient. Even when I used to go aggravated or cry or whatever, he was always the same loving, kind man. So I think that he is my Pedro. I just saw him the other day, and it was like people were looking at me like I was crazy because I was hugging him. And yeah. And then my other Pedro is my three children that on my journey, whether it was with ups or downs, they were there. And I learned how to be resilient because of them, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And now we outside, you know what I mean? Willie and I outside. It's an extension, you know what I mean? Listen, there's a Bible verse that says that in order for the wheat to spread, it's got to die. The wheat has to hit the floor and it has to die to then spread and create seeds elsewhere. That's the whole definition of legacy. That is the whole concept of what happened with Pedro's life. And I feel like we are all on the back end of somebody being willing to step out in some way, shape, or form. That's what's so crazy about this.
You know, Pedro said that we were all connected. The first day that I had a conversation with him, I'll never forget. He said, he said, he was gonna be a dad. And of course he knew that there was gonna be a boy. No, we didn't know what. I said, well, if it's a boy, you can name him Black Pete, because Pedro used to say he never said he was Puerto Rican. He always said he was black. I said, okay, so you couldn't have a baby and a boy, you name him Black Pete. He goes,
Black Pete is crazy.
hell no. We have a Black Pete in the family. And I looked at him, I said, oh, I grew up with a Black Pete that used to come to my house and work with my dad. And he said, from where? And I said, from where? And he called his father. And sure enough, his father was Black P. So I knew his father way before Pedro was even born. And he
That's
said, you see,
crazy.
Evelonia, everyone is connected somehow.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, similar story, not similar, but in terms of connectivity, somebody that I know, their brother passed away, and they were looking for flowers for his funeral, and when looking at the website
Ay,
looking
ay,
for
ay.
flowers, one of the more beautiful arrangements that he had picked out, he sent it and he was like, yo, look at this, what do you think of this? And my mother looked at this flower arrangement, and the default picture on this website for the flower arrangement was Pedro Santana sitting there with his arms crossed like that.
That's crazy.
That connectivity is crazy. Your Pedro inspires you, and you become someone else's Pedros, and all the Pedros are connected. This life is beautiful. It's a beautiful life, and if we all live it a quarter of the way that Pedro lived his, then maybe we did something right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we might be doing okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass it over to IV now to end it all off. But after Isaiah finishes doing his thing and doing his outro, we have some words and some things shared by some family and friends of Pedro that wanted to contribute to some way. So once Isaiah is done talking, don't go anywhere. We're just gonna let that be our closer. But thank you, Grandma, for coming on to talking about this. It's beautiful that we're able to have these conversations like this, and in this medium, and as vulnerable and free. You know, not everybody gets to say that they get to sit here at, I'm gonna be very honest, at almost 1 a.m. and have these conversations with their grandmother and cousins like this. So it's a beautiful thing.
We're glad you're here, and we hope that this isn't the last time you join us.
No, I'm already thinking about
you coming back, because we got to talk about Mariska Hargitay. We got to talk about Law and Order. We got to talk about organized crime. Come on. We got to have Fran here. I'm going to put Fran next to me so we can talk. Because we be in there. You watching Organized Crime right now, Grandma? You watching that right now? All right, you need to watch that. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Cuzzo-OP. It was a special one. This was a very special one. So we're thankful for you taking a listen. We hope that this conversation made a mark on you. If you're looking to watch My Name is Pedro, check out the description of this episode wherever you're listening. We'll make sure that the clips are there so you can go ahead and watch it. And yeah, we're thankful for you. Every time you tap into Cuzzo-OP, there's always a couple things you know you're going to find. And it's this: 2 cousins, 1 podcast, and endless entertainment. Peace.
Pedro Santana, father of Pedro Santana Jr. And I want to tell you that I miss him so much. I have movies of him, and I watch it often. I miss him. I miss him so much. And I'm glad that he helped everybody out. I'm glad that he was a good person, and I love him very much.
From the words of Evelyn, Pedro was always so kind, fun to be around, funny, and strong. He was someone you would want to spend time with and talk to all the time. Every time I see old pictures of him, I smile.
I probably met Mrs. Santana when I was a toddler, maybe. I can't even remember the time or how old I was when I met him, but I always remember him being like someone that my mom respected so much at her job. Because, you know, you have those few people that you talk about in a negative way at home from work, but like Pedro was always someone that mom was like, oh, Mrs. Santana, he's so great, he's so funny, he's so this. And their relationship obviously grew over the years, where now his family was my family, my family was his. And even after his passing, you know, I consider some of his family my family still. And one thing that I can say is that, like, that is who he was, that big impression of a person, you know. being that I grew up with him and I got to see him in a professional setting and a personal setting, he was, consistent with who he was with each and every individual he encountered. And he was intentional and he acknowledged people. And that was like something that I really admired. Because, as you grow up, you want to be impressionable and you want people to see you. And he just did it in such a natural, effortless way. And, that's always stayed with me. I am a leader, and I will say that I think that I've adopted things that I know Pedro would be proud of, in the sense, like, I am transparent. I work collaboratively with every single person on my team. I care about them. I want them to do their best. I'm here for them in any way. Like, it's just an open door policy. And that's what it was with Pedro. And I choose to be like Pedro, in the sense, like, the one thing that's really, really important for me and the impression I want to make on people is that they can be who they are and around me and feel great about that. And I think I definitely get that from Pedro.
Hi, my name is Mimi Santana, and I'm Pedro Santana's sister. He would call us the Puerto Rican twins because we 11 months apart. And we were very close. We did most things together. I miss him dearly. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him. I currently work in the school where he was the principal. And there's so many reminders in the school. There's so many people that still work there that every day someone says something about, remember when he. And there's times that when the building is quiet and I'm walking down the corridors, I could hear him, Mira. That's how he would call the students. And I could hear his voice. He was just an amazing educator, an amazing brother, father, son. It's been 10 years. And it seems like it was just yesterday. It's the pain is there, you just learn how to live with it. The movie, amazing. If you haven't watched it, watch it, please. It's an amazing, inspirational, makes you laugh, it makes you cry. He is the epitome of what a leader should look like, or what a leader should do, what a leader could do. He was amazing, and I miss him every day. Until we meet again, my brother. Love you.
From the words of Isa, I remember little sprinkles and spurts of feeling so loved. He would affirm me even when I didn't ask him to, making me feel loved, seen, and smart, like I had purpose.
Can't believe it's been 10 years since Pedro passed away. We often reminisce about our childhood, how laughter was one of the many tools we used to get through tough times. Laughter, joy, and living for the moments are all things that Pedro taught us through his actions. I remember waking up Thanksgiving morning super early to make sure that we had prime viewing of the parade. All of this orchestrated by my brother Pedro. The other things I remember in terms of like joy and laughter and living for the moment is if any opportunity arose itself for us to take family portraits, it was mandatory that we did it. No excuses. Because for Pedro, it was, that's the moment that we have and we should take advantage of that moment and memorialize it, because we don't know when that next moment's going to be available to us. One of the other mantras that I live by that was taught by my brother is always be open to impact. And that to me means be available, make yourself available for opportunity, for having that conversation with that person next to you, with asking someone and sincerely, be willing to listen to how are you doing? Because that conversation, that moment of impact can change your life or can change the life of the person that you're talking to or you're interacting with. I live by that. I teach my kids that. Put yourself out there. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations, because that is when you're going to learn the most and you're going to grow the most. My brother was very good at not only putting himself in uncomfortable situations, but putting us in uncomfortable situations. Living that, hated it, but now, retrospectively, I'm thankful for him to be that person, to say, no, we are going to do this. That's, for me, the biggest legacy that Pedro has, is that ability to understand people, that ability to really connect with people in a way that's more than, the standard, how you doing, but is how are you doing, listening, and having that level of conversation. And that's something that, for me, is his biggest legacy, along with, again, the notion of joy, laughter, and being available at that moment.
I have so many memories of Pedro, and I'm so grateful for them. He was a man who loved family and loved hard and cared for people so deeply and was so intentional to listen to people. And when you were around Pedro, if you wrestled with any confidence, or if you struggled with ever feeling like you were enough or had any worth, being around Pedro, you just felt like you were a star, because the way that he looked at you and the way that he welcomed you and the way that he spoke to you and believed in you, even if you were just a star in Pedro's show, it was awesome. And so I remember he came to chapel to hear me speak when I worked at NIAC, when we were still in Rockland, and he came into the chapel, and I was speaking at chapel, and I could see him all the way in the back on the left side of the gym. And after we were done, we ended with some worship music, and there was an altar call for prayer. And I was praying for someone, and here he comes with a young lady next to him, and he brings her over to me. He waited for me to be done with the person I was praying for, and then I look up and I look at him, and I look at the young lady who was a student, and he says, "Wandita, she needs you." And he said, "This is Wandita," and he left. And I later learned that he had come to chapel right after finding out his diagnosis. But that would be him, right? To get some news like that and still come and listen to me speak and still, connect people together. Is who he was. I loved that about him, that with the movie, what he did was connect people from all around the world together through his story. And you know what? He deserved that we would continue to talk about him and celebrate his life. And so I love him, and I learned a lot from him. And like I always say, as I continue to grow up, I want to be just like Pedro.
And that wraps up our very special episode of Cuzzo-OP. We thank you so much for listening. If you've listened this far and you've heard everything that everyone has needed to say, then you know very well what kind of legacy Pedro Santana was leaving behind for us. And may we continue the work that he began many years ago, and may he rest in peace.